Hello and welcome to the 25th episode of Naturally Scott. I'm your host, Scott Harris. Excited and proud to be your host, actually. And today's guest is a gentleman named Al Batt, B-A-T-T. Al lives in Heartland, Minnesota. He is a writer, a speaker, a storyteller, a humorist, a naturalist, and a birder. He has written books and columns. He does radio shows and podcasts and cartoon strips. And through all of it, his focus is humor and nature and stream of consciousness. I found it fascinating. I found him enjoyable to talk to. I think you'll find him enjoyable to listen to and to watch. So stay tuned with Al Batt and have a great time. As always, very much appreciate you watching and listening to the show. Stay safe and stay curious. Hello and welcome to Naturally Scott. I'm Scott Harris. I'm so glad you've joined us for this episode. My guest is a little bit different than some of the others, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him today. Al Batt of Heartland, Minnesota. And if I understand correctly, Al, you are a writer, a speaker, a storyteller, and a humorist.
Yeah, and thanks for the little bit different. That's the kindest thing that's been said to me about me for quite a while. He's just a little bit different. So happy to be here, Scott.
Well, I'm looking forward to. Hey, before we get rolling, when we were talking before the recording started, you mentioned you were under attack from some fox squirrels.
I am. There's a scurry of squirrels out there. There's a bunch of them, and they sense that I'm otherwise occupied. So this is a great time to really hit the feeders. I love squirrels. It'd be a sad world if squirrels did not walk upon it. Just their ability to be acrobats is worth having them around. And they outsmart me. I put up all kinds of baffles on my feeders. I move them around, and I think I'm a human, I'm much smarter than they are. No, I'm not. They outsmart me every single time. They study on it. And I figured out, Scott, if we spend all our life, this time of year anyway, trying to do one thing, that's get food, we're going to get really good at it after a while. Humans we're thinking about, gosh, I got that eye appointment today. Do I really want to go in and spend another grand for we got all those other things on our minds. Squirrels got one thing: get those black oil sunflower seeds, and they're so good at it, and I admire them, and I'm just so happy they keep me company.
Well, I am too, and we've got a little bird sanctuary out in the between the houses here on the property, and so I've got my feeders out there. I try not to call them bird feeders because
That's right.
I don't discourage the squirrels. I've never gone with the baffles. I figure, you know what, I'm at a point in life I can afford just a couple extra bucks a month for the seeds and the peanuts that they take. And I know it's sacrilege. A lot of my audience are birders, and many of them spend a good amount of their energy and time trying to deter squirrels. I got to tell you, given the afternoon and the temperature and the cigar, I sometimes prefer the squirrels to the birds sitting out on the front porch and watching. And you're right, they're fascinating. So we have in our sanctuary, we've got a chain that goes across between two long trees. And from that chain, we hang 2 or 3 feeders, and we've got some plants hanging from there, just some stuff to spruce up the area. And my son was saying the other day, hey, let's get that chain down. And, it's the one unnatural thing, if you will. So we haven't taken it down yet, but we did grab one of the big, the ones where you feed the woodpecker squares, the 8-inch woodpecker squares, they slot in. So we took an old hummingbird, the shepherd's poles, and we stuck a shepherd's pole a good 6 feet from the nearest tree and just hung it from that just to get that first thing off the chain. And that was 2 days ago. And my son came in yesterday and said, well, took the squirrels one day to discover they could leap 6 feet. And they come down the tree and they get they get parallel with the shepherd's pole, and they leap across and they have a go at it. So
good for you.
Yeah.
I live out in the country, so we have corn. So I feed them corn, and I say, here's the deal. I'm going to give you all this corn. Just, you can get on the feeder. Just don't chew it up. That's all I ask. And they promise, but sadly, they are liars sometimes. They don't keep their promises. And you're right about the bird feeder. Cooper's hawks. I have Cooper's hawks in my yard. Well, they consider those bird feeders as a place where they go to get a bird and eat it. So yeah, it's hard when we say bird feeder because it means different things to different. Yes, I'm sure the squirrels say, look, they're filling the squirrel feeder for us.
Yep.
And that's what we'd think if we were outside looking for food.
Well, and
So
that's kinda like birds that migrate. We claim there are birds, but they spend more time in Central or South America, the ones that go south, than they do here, and they might consider themselves, Costa Ricans on vacation in Florida for a couple of months.
we think about that Orioles. Everybody here talks about, oh, my Orioles have left. And I'm so happy they care that much for them. But you're right. They're not our Orioles. They're not down way down south, probably talking about us at all.
No, I don't think they are, and, I am grateful for the time that they're here, and like many yards, my yard does serve as a bit of a buffet. Mine more for Sharpies than Coopers, but they're delighted when I put the feeders out because they
They
get
are.
theirs, and then the deer treat it like, the soup plantation with salads, and they're probably my single biggest monthly expense. My wife insists on replanting the flowers, and I have a sense that when I'm not there, the deer are calling Home Depot and saying, "When the Harrises come in, this is what we prefer, for the month of October," and they add it to the bill, and off we go. So I don't
Send more hostas. The more expensive, the better. That's they
exactly, and we
love
like the
hostas.
bright flowers, the big expensive bright flowers.
Yep.
They'd starve before they ate a weed.
That's right.
But if I've written a check for it, they're gonna munch on. They'll come right up on the front porch.
And I can't hunt them, Scott, because I saw Bambi when I was a little boy. My
You know,
mom
I
said I
don't
cried all the way home, so
Well, I'm with you on that. I don't begrudge them. I don't begrudge hunters. And, we've got right across from us is a forest. And honestly, if they weren't hunted, they'd starve in the winter, that typical culling thing. But I can't do it. It's not in me to do it. And, for those who do, and by the way, many of those who do provide me with venison.
yeah,
So, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. I'm not attacking hunters. And as I've discovered since I've gotten into birding, quite a few birders are hunters,
yes,
and quite a few of them started off as hunters and maintain their hunting status. So, at first, I thought that was a bit of a conflict, but as I've grown into the hobby, I realize it's really not. If it's done correctly, if it's done for food and not for trophy,
that's right.
it's a very similar hobby and little
And I
different.
raised beef cattle and pigs and chickens and ducks and geese and guinea fowl and peafowl, and I'm sure goats. And so growing up, I knew where our food came from. So I could never criticize a hunter, I guess, for getting out and getting something to eat.
Isn't it amazing though how many people seem surprised when they discover where the food came from? As
It
if it
is.
showed up plastic wrapped at
Yeah.
Safeway, it just was miraculously there.
I'm the baby of the family, so we'd be eating a pork chop. One of the older ones would say, "How does Timmy taste to you?" Because we named all the animals. We weren't supposed to, but we did. So that was hard sometimes, but my mom made pork chop so good that I could overcome it sooner or later.
Well, I'm glad you found that inner strength, Al. We had going back a number of years, my wife and I are married 46 years. We had a small farm that we did with another couple that are still friends of ours 50 years later. And on that farm, we had cattle and we had pigs and we had turkeys and ducks and whatnot and rabbits. And we would periodically slaughter them and we would eat them. And that lasted up until the first one that my wife named. She named something, I can't remember if it was a pig or a cow, whatever it was, and that was the end of it. Then I just had the world's most expensive petting zoo.
That's right.
So we had to disband that because we didn't have any money when we were kids, first married, and what went from a pretty smart economic decision, quickly became a horrible decision, and so we moved all those animals on. I'm not sure she fell for it at age 25, but I told her they went to a big farm out in the country
Sure.
and and that they were all happy, and we'd probably get Christmas cards.
They're romping with other animals and
They
just
are, they are.
enjoying themselves. Yeah.
That's where it is. They've got a full-time petter that just comes by and says
We
hello.
had that annual meeting every year. My dad would say, "Kids, we need to talk," which didn't mean we got to talk. It was, "You kids need to listen." And then he'd give us that lecture about naming the animals. I don't
Yeah.
want to hear anybody naming an animal. And of course, but just like squirrels, we're liars. 2 minutes, we were naming them again.
Yep, yep. Even with the best of intentions, getting children to not name animals
Wow.
just seems like a bit of a trick.
We had so many fluffies. We had that one goldfish that we'd win at the fair. They give it to you in a little plastic bag because you knocked down some milk bottles with a
Yep.
ball. And if it made it home, which not many did, they didn't last very long. So then you had that flush funeral, and then you got another goldfish, and it was named Fluffy. Once again, they were all named Fluffy. And I don't know that we did those poor little fish much good. They didn't seem to last very long.
Well, goldfish don't have a tremendous, well, I guess to them, they probably have a perfect life expectancy, but,
That's
uh,
probably right.
I imagine it's all perspective. I'm sure there's tortoises saying, "These humans don't have much of a life expectancy."
That's right. I got to say a lot of nice words over a toilet as we flushed another goldfish down.
You
Here's
know,
we'll always remember Fluffy. He was what a goldfish.
did you number them? I mean, did you get like Fluffy 7 and Fluffy 8, or were they
No,
all
I was more into English than arithmetic. It's like
okay?
math, what a concept. It just
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, now tell me a bit about your work. I've read about it. I've read some of the work. I've watched a couple podcasts. You do humor and nature columns. You combine the two.
yes.
I believe you do cartoon strips as well.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about A Life Gone to the Birds, a book that you've written.
Yeah.
Let's start with the columns and the cartoon strips. How did that get started? Back us up to, I don't know if you consider yourself a birder or a naturalist or what that is, but take us back to childhood when you weren't flushing goldfish.
Okay.
What was your interest in nature? And then how did that turn out to be books and podcasts and columns and cartoons?
I think it was probably my dad. We pastured cattle, and pasture was for us was a big old swamp called Mule Lake because apparently a team of mules had tipped over and drowned in there in the way back, like 1850 something. So we'd have to go get the cows, and they were in the woods. We had about 50 acres of woods. So you had to hunt them down. You had a dog that would help you. But as we walked, I was the baby of the family, so got to spend a lot of time alone with my father doing things. And he would point out birds, indigo bunting, was a blue canary. So they had different names. I remember the wood thrush was a swamp angel for some reason. So we didn't have a bird book, but it was so much fun walking with my father. I remember discovering a snowy owl with him, which was just incredible.
Now, was this
All
in
the
Minnesota?
neighbors, yep, all the neighbors came over to look at it. We went to the library. The library was held something called encyclopedias. I know a lot of folks listening are probably saying, "What is that? Like a bicycle, a one-wheel bicycle or something?" It's like Wikipedia, and it came in huge books. So I had to get all the O's down because I was looking up owls, and I had my yellow Ticonderoga #2 pencil and that Big Chief notebook made out of rag paper, and I'm writing everything I can about those snowy owls. So I became a snowy owl tour leader as the neighbors, friends, and relatives came over to look at this bird just on the edge of Mule Lake. And that had a huge impact on me because, boy, it was just, grown-ups were listening to me. It was so cool because as the baby of the family, you're always yelling or whining about something because you said, nobody ever listens to me. They did, but you just felt you. So I think that snowy owl and my father just had a huge impact and kind of set my life's path. And when I was a kid, we went to a little school. There was 15 in my grade, but we rode on the bus for like 3 days. I swear you'd get on, and you just, especially on the way home, we'd stop for everybody, and it just took forever to get home. So I was always so anxious to get home. We'd pull up by our long farm driveway, and they'd wheeze that door open. And our bus driver would smile. He was a safe bus driver, but he became a bus driver because he didn't like kids at all. He was happy to see you get off the bus. So he'd have this smile like a wave across the slot pile as I'd get off. And I'd skip because we skipped in those days. You'd skip up the drive a little ways and go by the barn, and there was my dad getting ready to milk the cows. I'd make a right, go by the pump house with those big wind turbine, they call them now, but it was a windmill on it, squeaking away. And then I'd walk up and I'd open the big gate. We had this huge wooden gate that you go into the fence because we had to fence everything in. My ancestors, when they came here, they planted lilacs. That's how they marked their territory. And then you planted peonies or peonies, whichever side of that issue you're on. And then there were critters around, so you had to put a fence around it, otherwise they would eat everything. So I'd close that gate. It creaked one way and it creaked a different as you closed it, so you could tell if people were coming or going. And I'd walk up and we had a mud room, which with all the livestock, we had a lot of things other than mud that needed to be shed there. And I'd walk into the kitchen, and there was my mom doing the dishes. She did the dishes 23 hours a day. I don't know how they dirtied themselves in the cupboard, but she said the same thing every time. She'd turn around, smile at me, and say, "Well, honey, what did you learn in school today?" Every year of school, all the way through till graduation, what did you learn in school today? And that's sweet, and I love my mom more than anything on earth, but that's a lot of pressure, Scott. Man, what did I learn in school? To melt down all that you learned that day to come up with a winner. And then I have to be honest, there were some days when I didn't learn anything. I actually lost what I'd learned the day before. I was working on a deficit. So you'd kind of say, and she didn't say anything after that. She was a good salesman. You make your pitch and then you shut up and make the prospect talk. So I'd swallow hard. And on those days when I didn't learn anything, I'd tell a story. It wasn't always completely true. There was basis in fact. So I was in school. I thought that was enough.
It was truth adjacent.
Yes. And then mom would laugh. And Glory, that was just to hear her laugh. I wish I had a tape of my mother's laugh so I could just listen to that laugh. It just made me float up. It was like a choir of angels singing when mom laughed because I knew I was done. That was it. It wouldn't get any better this day. This is where it was at. So every day I would tell her a story. And again, I tried to make more of them truth than not truth. I'm not sure if I did. I'm going to say 50-50 on them, but she loved them all. She made me a storyteller. We all have that kind of genesis on how we became a storyteller. Some of so often storytellers become storytellers because of something bad or something that went horribly wrong in their life and how they came out of it. And that's wonderful. I am so lucky. I became a storyteller because of this wonderful thing that happened in my life, this wonderful person that just made me feel like I could do anything on earth. If I could make my mom laugh, that was it. And I have to add, I loved my dad, but I'm not sure telling him those stories would have worked quite as well. He might have bellered a little bit. He was one of 12 kids, so he'd heard everything pretty much before. But mom, oh, she made me a storyteller. And I think of that the other day. We have ebony jewel wings here. I'm not sure if you guys have them in South Carolina. They're
No,
damselflies. And a lot of folks like dragonflies, and they'll call them a dragonfly. And dragonflies have their wings out like a little fixed wing airplane, where damselflies fold their wings so it makes them look really skinny, like they've done really well in a lose some weight program. And I was looking at this, and they're either blue and black or black and blue, depending on the light and your perspective on these things. And I'm looking at that thing, and it's just posing there. I don't have a camera. I'm not sketching it. I'm just standing there looking at this insect. It was an emotional support insect. And I realized that there's 8.2 billion people on this earth, but I was the one that got to see that ebony jewel wing and stare at it for the longest time. So I think these are all lessons that my mom gave me by laughing. And then I became, after that snowy owl, I became the bird guy in my class. There was 15 in there, so it was a lofty position. We actually had a field guide in school, and kids would come up and they'd point out a bird in a tree, and they say, "What is that?" And I'd say, "Well, it's no owl." And they'd say, "Wow, you know a lot about birds." So I became sort of the bird guru after that. So I didn't have a choice. I had to be a bird guy. And I've always loved stories all my life. I think about the best teachers I had, storytellers. Every one of them told a story. And it was a sneaky way of getting me to learn, because I could stare at algebra forever and a day and say, I don't really care what Y or X or whatever it is. And then they'd throw in a little story, and all of a sudden I cared. And it didn't have to be even related greatly to that, but they'd still hook you somewhere. So I think storytelling is one of the One of the great gifts that's given to mankind, that we can tell a story, that we can sit down with people and tell a story and share a moment with people. And we can all do it with other devices. But man, you probably like me, we grew up sitting around a fire telling spooky stories, hold a flashlight under your chin. There's no movie ever made that was scarier than some of those things. Those urban legends, none of them were true. And I suspect we didn't think they were true, but oh my gosh, they were so scary.
There was
So
always
there's
a chance they were true.
Yes, I still think that spoken word is just has a power, great power. I I looked out right before I started talking to you. A pileated woodpecker was on my suet feeder, and then it flew on to an ash tree that's on its way out. Unfortunately, we're losing all of them. And on the same trees, kind of spiraling up, scurrying up, was a brown creeper. This tiny little brown creeper and this giant pileated woodpecker or pileated if folks are on that side.
Affiliated.
Yeah, me too. And I watched this and I became Tickle Me Elmo. I didn't even have to push my ribs in it. I just started giggling. And again, I think it all goes back because I want to laugh at things like my mom laughed at my stories. I see things. I want to laugh. I want to giggle. I want to have a good time. We're here for a pretty short time. And we all hear, kids laugh like 9 million times a day and grown-ups laugh like six times. We need to laugh more. We need to, that old thing, don't take it so serious. You're not getting out of here alive. We need to laugh at stuff. And if I want to laugh, I want to giggle watching a pileated woodpecker and a brown creeper race to the top of a dying ash tree. To me, that is great, great humor there. So I started writing. I had wonderful teachers that encouraged me. I took all the speech classes. And again, I need to apologize for my voice. I know we talked earlier. I am post-operative, so I have kind of a voice that's about half of what it usually is.
It's got a little Clint Eastwood thing going on there.
I'll take that. Sure.
Little
That's
little
that's what
gravel.
I'm aiming for is
Well, then
Quentin.
you should be happy. It's got a little gravitas, a little gravel in there. It's good to go.
I had wonderful teachers, and I tried to thank them all. I'm sure I forgot some of them. They pushed me harder than I wanted to be pushed sometimes, and I resented it at times. But man, looking back, I had great teachers. I loved every English class, every composition class, every speech class, any of those things I loved. So they encouraged me to write. When I was in the second grade, I wrote a play for our elementary school, got to direct it from off stage. It was amazing. I wanted to put myself in the lead role, but the teacher said that was a little much. You can't do that. So I had these wonderful teachers. After I grew up, I still heard from those teachers. I started writing columns because a couple of editors called me and said, Al, you're kind of a knucklehead. No, you're not kind of a knucklehead. You are a knucklehead. Do you think you could write something for a paper? And I said, I love papers. And they said, we're not talking toilet papers now. We're talking about actual newspapers. Do you think you could write something? So I started writing. And of course, being gung ho, I wrote about 3,000 words for the first column and got a call and say, let's go with 750, maybe. That'd be a little better. I said, oh gosh, some of those 3,000 were really good. And she said, like six of those words were really wonderful. Keep those, get rid of all the rest. So I started writing, and one thing led to another where I'm able to write in a lot of newspapers and magazines and things. And it's been just a blessing in my life. I've heard from so many wonderful people. I've met so many people like you. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met so many people that are such an important part of my life because I was able to lean one word against another. They talk about invest here, what great returns we get. This is a great return, writing a couple words and getting to talk to somebody about those words. I just love what I do. And I'm happy that there's no way I could rattle off the names of everybody that has come into my life and enhanced it one way or another. I don't know that they all knew they were enhancing my life, but I do. It makes me stride the earth like a colossus to meet some of these people. It's funny. I'm sure you're this way. We have people that have been part of our life for 25 years, never met them. their emails or maybe a text, and they're the nicest people on earth. So everybody has a bucket list. Mine is to meet some of these people that I haven't had the ability or the time, or, we all get so busy, we just can't do stuff. I'd love to meet some of those people. I don't want to just show up in their yard and burst open their front door and say, surprise, but I'd love to
Although it would be
contact
a
them.
surprise.
It would definitely be a surprise, but everything has been sort of serendipitous how this works. Started writing because a couple of editors thought maybe I could do that job, and they had to retrain me, of course, but it was fun, and I'm still doing those. I write 4 or 5 columns a week. Couple of one's all about nature, a couple are about humor, and another one's kind of nature and humor cross. Serendipitous, maybe. I've written about people I've met. I've written about people that are important to me. I've written more times than I can count what the difference is between a birder and a bird watcher. I get asked that a lot. And I said, I'm both. I don't care, and then I tell them, repeat after me. And I say, I am a birder and a bird watcher. And I say, I now pronounce you a birder and a bird watcher. If you can tell bur oak tree from a blue jay, you're a birder and a bird watcher. Go out and sin no more. So they are, but that's one of the questions that pop up over and over again. People want to be tagged, I guess. We want to know what we are. And there's no reason. You can call yourself a kumquat. I don't care just so you love birds. Because if you love birds, you're going to love flowers. You're going to love trees. You're going to love the landscape. You're going to love habitat. You're going to worry about some things you never dreamed you'd worry about, pesticide use, because you never dreamed of that. But in the long run, you're going to make the world a better place because you love and you care. When we love something, we care about it and we want to preserve that. A friend of mine was collecting Indian artifacts. He had 2,700 Indian artifacts. And one day he's out there digging, and it occurred to him that he might not live forever. He said, up to that point, I thought I was just, by the time something bad happened to me, they'd give me a shot and I'd be okay. So then he went off and he campaigned for a state park. He raised money. He got signatures. And we ended up with a local state park because of Owen Johnson. Owen Johnson, they always tell us one person can't make a difference. It's the only thing that makes a difference is one person. And that was Owen Johnson. So if we love something the way he loved it, because he said, I want other people, future generations, to be able to see what I've seen out here. And at the time he was doing that, there were 17 woodlots where people were cutting wood. And now it's a beautiful state park with trails and bike trails. It's just an incredible place. It's one of those places where you can go and just feel at ease, I guess. You just feel good. You can sit down and say, what a wonderful joy this is just to be able to come here and sit. But Owen Johnson. So I've had a lot of wonderful people in my life that have really made me what I am today. And I'm sure some will deny any work in that whole process of what I've become. But I love people, love birds. I love insects. I was out the other day, I got bit by a mosquito, something we call a minute pirate bug. If something bites you and there's nothing there, it's a minute pirate bug, and they bite way out of their weight class, and you swat them. And I'm not proud of it, but I feel a just great delight in swatting one. I have to apologize later. And then I got bitten by a multicolored Asian lady beetle. So this is just getting the mail. That was a trifecta to get bitten by pretty much everything that's out there biting. So I felt pretty good about it. And I just thanked everybody for their participation in my walk and made me hike a little faster to really appreciate where my spot in life is. I'm not always on the top of the food chain. There's tiny things I can barely see that are just above me. So it was, but again, writing, man, I go off on tangents. I, it is, I got a hat on and everything else. Again, it's kind of that post-operative thing, but because it's cold here, it's raining. Bob Dylan saying a cold rain is going to fall. It's fallen. It is really, really cold. And I just came in from being out there, and it's October, but it's a beautiful winter day here. And I know I did a radio show this morning and somebody said, Al, it's not even winter. But I said, if you call it a beautiful winter day, just pretend this is winter. You'd be saying, "This is the most beautiful winter day we've ever had in existence of the state of Minnesota. This is incredible." So I'm thinking of today as a winter day, and boy, is it lovely. I can't imagine a nicer winter day.
Well, you're the first person this year I'll say this to. Merry Christmas.
Hey, well, thanks. I've got all my shopping done already, so
Well, there you go. You're
I
covered.
got everybody minute pirate bugs. I got them in a little bottle.
Yeah, but they're smashed.
They
Well,
are.
it's funny because when you were talking about the writing thing, I had a column for a number of years. Mine was political, but I kind of got started the same way. The publisher of a newspaper and I used to get together and have breakfast once a month and just talk about everything, from the family to politics to, the Mets versus the Dodgers or whatever it was. And then one day he said, Scott, I kind of like your perspective on politics. What do you think about writing a Sunday column for me? And if it goes well, we can do it every week. And to your point back then, when Eisenhower was president, there were, you'd get 900, I would get 900 words a column. And by the time I was done, I was down to 600, although I noticed everybody else was still at 900. So I'm not sure what that meant. And the audience is going to have to forgive my French, but I wrote the first column and I turned it in. I got a call. The guy's name was Tim, and he called and he goes, "You know what, Scott?" And I said, "I mean, have Pulitzer called already? I mean, I assume that." And he said, "Scott, I don't know how to tell you, so I'm just going to tell you." And again, excuse my French. He goes, "I could have gotten this from any asshole on a bar stool. If you want to write something that you put some thought into that you think might be of interest, then send me another column." And I did, and I wrote it for years, and I had a couple of radio shows and a TV gig going, and I absolutely loved it. And then, like you, I wrote a humor column for a while for a magazine. It was a monthly magazine, and I would write their back cover column, and I had a blast doing that. So yeah, it's fun. I certainly never wrote 3 or 4 columns a week like you're talking about. I had a weekly column, and what better, it wasn't even a monthly; it was a bi-monthly, and not twice a month, but every other month bi-monthly. It was just 6 of those, and then the weekly political column and and books. I've written 50 something books in the last
Wow.
10 years. So speaking of which, tell me, because this is a podcast about you, not about me. Tell me about A Life Gone to the Birds.
Yeah, it's Bill Thompson was with well,
BWD, Birdwatchers
yep,
Digest.
it's beat, yep,
His wife, Julie Zickafuss, has been a guest on this show.
yep. Now it's BWD, and before it was Birdwatchers Digest. And when I talk about good people that came into my life, man, Bill Thompson, he's just, I don't know how you find a better person than Bill was. And it was his idea. He called me up one day and said, "You got all this stuff. Why don't you put out a book?" And I said, "Oh, gosh, I'm pretty busy, Bill. Gosh, I got the radishes. I got to pluck up some of those. They're almost, I love radish sandwiches, Bill. You know how I do." And he just kept after me. So it was all him. Just BT3. He just, sadly, he's no longer with us. And I miss him every day. But it's just a bunch of things, stories of growing up on a farm with a nature bent and birds more than anything. And I owe it all to Bill. And it was all his idea. And I sent it all to him and he edited it and he did all the hard work. I did none of it except send it to him. And it's funny how many wonderful people come in our lives. And then when they leave, it leaves a hole. And he's one of those that you just think, because every so often something funny happens and Bill and I kind of shared a sense of humor because it wasn't big enough, I guess, for any more than the two of us. And I think I should let Bill know this. And of course, then I think he's not around anymore to let him know. So I'm keeping a file. So when we do meet again, and I'll have all these. And I said, "I've been saving these for you. And if you don't laugh, I'm going to be really hurt." So he was,
And are you
I
under
meant,
the impression you'll get to bring those files with you?
yeah, I think so. I think so. You got to go through TSA, though, I understand. So it could be tough. Bill and I worked at so many bird festivals that we got to spend a lot of time together. We were usually speakers, and then we were tour leaders. And then Bill would play with his band. They had a great "Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowbirds," and he had some great songs that just, I'd sit there and say, "Man, I should have paid more attention in school to music." to that. We had that little thing that we had to learn how to play in the fourth grade or something. I don't know whatever happened to those. Every school had them. But Bill was a talented musician, just incredibly talented. And he wrote songs and he'd always hang around with really good people. And Julie was a wonderful singer that would also sing with them. And they would always end up singing at a festival because even if they weren't on the bill, we'd all demand they come up and sing anyway. So by popular request, they were always there. And their music was just delightful. So,
I
and I'm,
played in a blues band for 5 years, and
oh,
I'm trying to remember if we were ever brought up by popular request. I'm not so certain we were. I think most of our music was imposed, not requested.
I love the blues.
Uh, it was it was so much fun. We had the best time. If you love the blues, I'll tell you a quick story you might enjoy. We got invited to play. We lived in Southern California, and we got invited to headline at a room out in Laughlin, Nevada. And it was for us, it was a big gig, hotel rooms for everybody and food vouchers and a decent sized check. And, we were treated like a rock solid garage band. And we get out there, and I had not looked at the contract very closely, my mistake. And we were used to usually 2-hour gigs, 3 hours on the outside. And we got there, and the guy said, "Okay, you go on at 8 tonight." Great. And then we're going to do the next night as well, Friday and Saturday night. I said, "Do we get off at 10 or at 11?" And he goes, "Well, you can take your break whenever you want." And I said, "My break? What do you mean my break?" And he said, "Well, you play until 2." And I said, "No, no, no, that's 12 hours over 2 days. We don't have 12 hours worth of music. We don't have 6 hours worth of music." And he said, "Well, I don't care what you do, but you're up on that stage for 6 hours." So, the great thing about the blues is it's just a 1-4-5. You can just keep playing it over and over. And so by about 11 or 11:30 on Friday night, we were just sitting up there playing the same thing over and over and just making up lyrics. There were 6 of us in the band, and we'd each just take a spot and make some crap up and hope that people were drunk enough they didn't notice. And
You were like the Blues Brothers playing
oh
Rawhide.
my goodness, that was learning under fire, by the way, which was fun. Now, on your website, it says that your mother thinks you're a big deal. And you mentioned that she passed. Do you think she passed still thinking you were a big deal?
Yeah, I think so because she was my mom. She was, you grow up the day you lose your mother. It's a terrible thing when you lose your father because you have to be more responsible, but you can still be kind of a kid because you have your mom. Boy, you lose your mom, and all of a sudden the whole world changes. I loved my mom. She was, I think, the best person I've ever known. She never said anything bad. I know everybody says that. I never say anything bad about anybody either. I said, no, my mom never said anything bad about anybody, even me. And she knew me well enough that she could have come up with a whole litany of things. But yeah, I think so.
Maybe
She
she's
was,
waiting until you get upstairs. She might have a file like you've prepared for Bill. Honey, I
she was
never shared this with you when we were both back down on terra firma, but now there's a couple things I'd like to say
a
to
couple
you.
of things I'd like to bring up now. Yeah, she would have been able to get it through TSA too. I know they
There
would
you
have said,
go.
you're so sweet, lady. You go on through.
I think there's two things that might be indicators of having led a very fortunate life. If you think your mom is the sweetest woman in the world, and if you think your dog is the best dog in the world, if you've got those two things going for you, I think it says as much about you as it does about your mom and your dog,
I think
but it's probably the sign of a life well led.
I believe that fully, Scott.
Oh,
Yes.
that's kind of cool. Now, we mentioned music. I have to ask you about it. I was reading your blog from just yesterday, the headline being Take Another Piece of My Heart. So, are you a Janis Joplin or a Dusty Springfield guy?
I like both of them. Yeah, I
Okay.
do. Yeah, the column was about I was going in for surgery and they ask you, what kind of music would you like to listen to while you're going under? Well, you count down from 10, 9, and you're gone. So you don't get to hear a whole lot of it. I love John Prine, but I figured, you got to listen to his song. I'd be unhappy that I didn't hear the end of it. So I went with the Rolling Stones. And of course, I woke up and they were all done, and I was in a different room and just trying to figure out where I was, hoping to remember something while I was under anesthesiology. I always think I'll remember something that'll save the world, a dream, anything, but I remember nothing. But yeah, I love all music. just Neil Young, Van Morrison. I could listen. Warren Zevon, I considered him, but I was sure they were going to play "Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me" as I went under, and I thought that was really an appropriate song to be listening to while you're counting down to 8. They used to have me count down from 100, which is maybe that gives you hope because you say, well, 100, man. Now they just say, well, count down from 10. If you don't want to do that, you can count down from 3. So then you're kind of saying, well, I know where I'm sitting now. But yeah, I love music. What they said music has charms to soothe the savage breast. I fully believe that. And it also has things to fire us up.
They
You've
do.
been some concerts, it does the other, but boy, music can just calm you. And it's like birds. I visited at a nursing home the other day, and it looked like a wagon train that had been put in a circle because they were being attacked by hostile Native Americans. And it was people in their wheelchairs around the aviary looking at zebra finches and Gudin finches and all these things. They were happy, they were calm, they weren't even really talking to one another, they were just looking at those birds. And why were they doing that? Because it made them feel good. And they can give us all kinds of research saying it lowers blood pressure, it does this, it does that. But they were there looking at those birds because they wanted to be there looking at those birds. Birds are so important. We hear about in Japan, forest bathing, you walk through the trees, it calms you. Your insurance covers that in Japan, covers forest bathing. Oh my gosh, I have trouble getting mine to cover a Tylenol, but
Yeah,
over
I was
there
gonna
it
say
covers.
dental, but sure enough, I
Yeah,
I gotta share 2 quick ones with you, Al. You mentioned the counting back thing. I had, 4 or 5 surgeries in the last couple of years, nothing significant, but I did. And, one of the anesthesiologists I thought had a great sense of humor, had me count back from 17. And I didn't even make it to 16 because I was trying to figure out what the hell does that mean, 17? I would like you, I'd heard 10 every other
yeah.
day. Guy goes 17, and then I was trying to remember, did he have a smirk on his face or did he think I might make it? Then I felt inadequate as a patient and it was a lot of pressure. But I didn't make it to 15. And you mentioned John Prine. So I have 2 favorite lines from, it sounds like we both share a love of the old rock and roll. And I have 2 favorite lines, and one of them is John Prine's, from Angel in Montgomery.
Great song.
How the hell can a person go to work in the morning, come home in the evening, and have nothing to say?
Yeah,
And I hear that when I hear Bonnie Raitt sing that, it's like, you have got to be kidding me.
yeah,
That to me, that captures quiet desperation as well as any line that's ever written. And the
I
other one
agree.
is Johnny Cash, Folsom City Blues. I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. And I just, I, I don't know why it's those 2 long, but it has been forever. Those are the ones I remember.
We listened to a lot of Johnny Cash. My dad loved Johnny Cash and his wife. He just thought they were the Carter family was amazing. His favorite singer was Hank Williams Sr., Elijah the Wooden Indian, and all those wonderful things. We listened to that while we're milking the cows. I tried to convince Dad that the cows would give more milk if they listened to rock and roll instead of that country stuff, but I never won that argument, even though I brought it up every day. The only time I won is when he wasn't there. I bet when they had 17, they were probably betting to see how far down you got. All the nurses and everybody in there, they all throw in $5.
Well, whoever had 16 then got the 20 because I didn't see 15.
No,
And like
no,
you, I woke up in another room and I had no epiphanies.
no.
I had nothing. It was another 4 hours gone. It was like being back in high school drunk and you wake up in the morning and go, what happened from 3 to 9? What, something must have happened. But anyway, all right.
Now they'd have a video of you.
Yeah, that's probably, I think you might agree. I think it was great growing up in the time before social media.
Sure.
I would not have wanted 15 to 25 to have been captured in a
No,
million pictures and
I don't
videos.
think anybody did. There might be one person that never did anything stupid, but I don't know who that was.
Well, if they did, I never got to spend time with them. So,
No, me either.
and I'm blessed to still have my couple of best friends from 1969. We all met the first year of junior high school.
Wow.
and, there's 3 of them that I talk to at least once a week, if not twice a week.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it is an absolute blessing. The only downside to that is you can't make up stories because they were there.
Yeah.
Couldn't be as handsome, you weren't as good an athlete, you didn't get the prettiest girl,
Yeah.
although I eventually did.
Sure.
But your high school stories, you can BS the guys you meet now,
Yep.
but you can't BS the guys that were there with you. You know,
You
they're
can tell more stories that way, though. You just say, "Remember that time, Mr. Littlesby?" And they'll say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, the chess piece," and they all know it, so they can all
they
laugh,
do.
and you go to another one.
It's that shorthand that you have with your spouse. You just have to start the sentence. And, my wife now keeps track of how many times I tell her each of my 3 stories that I've
Oh, yeah,
related,
yeah.
so there we go. Okay, tell me about KMSU and Birding with Bat podcasts.
They sent me a certificate saying 40 years, I think, but I think they're just trying to get me out of town on the rail. I think it's been like 35 years, 36 maybe, that have been doing that. And it's a public radio station. And I go in and people call. We get a whole raft of calls and emails and texts. Today it was, why are there so many young bald eagles kind of all in a pile here? And I explained to them what they're young bald eagles. They don't know how to do much anything else. So some of them are migrating. So if you're going to migrate, you want some pals to migrate along with. But for the most part, they're probably down on the ground. They're looking for something to eat. I had them at the end of my driveway. Two of them were fighting over a dead cat. And then later, two were fighting over a dead raccoon that had been hit by cars. Because young bald eagles, they just haven't figured out how to hunt or fish yet. And we think everything is instinctual. We think, well, bird, they know everything. Oh, especially some of the longer lived ones, like some of the raptors, they have to learn a lot. So they're watching mom and dad. Are they paying much attention? Not enough. We were all there. So now they have to learn. They're trying to learn from other ones that know nothing more than they do. So that's kind of a dead end road because they're not teaching you. So they're out there. Maybe they find a deer. A dead deer got hit. Man, they're going to hang around there, those young bald eagles, because
Hey,
that is good grub right there, and they
yeah.
can feed on that. But if they're not so good, they're eating dead raccoon, which is, we think, what's our national bird now? It finally got to be our national bird, and it's eating a dead raccoon. That's not good. People want to chase them off the road and say, stop this. This isn't right. You have a lofty position. Go get a fish.
Well,
But
I have to tell you, for me, and I love bald eagles, and I've was on raptor rescue team for a number of years, so I picked up bald eagles. And of course, if you're on a raptor rescue team, the thing you pick up most often are 1-year-old starving raptors, because to your point, it's not instinctual. It's not intuitive. It's a learned behavior. And if they don't learn it quickly, they die. But from my point of view, and I love raptors, I wrote a book chasing all 53 of the raptors around the country we
wow.
have in the lower 48 called Raptor Quest. But to me, bald eagle, while it is stunning, number one, I don't think we should have picked a scavenger. And number two, I don't think that we should have picked a bird that we have to dub a red-tailed hawk's voice in for every time you're on a commercial or in a movie. Just put the
Yep.
bloody red-tailed hawk in there.
Yep.
That's a fighting bird right there with
It is.
war cry. To me, the bald eagle sounds like something that should be hunting. A little squeaky baby squirrel is what it sounds like. And so you see this massive 6-foot wingspan and 2-inch beak, and you've seen them, right? So their pads and talons are as big as your hand.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Killing machines, and then they let out this little Mike Tyson-y kind of thing. And I'm thinking, no, no. And I don't want to see it on the side of the road eating a 3-day-old rat.
No.
Fighting.
And then they steal fish from the osprey,
Oh,
who's
yeah, that's right.
it's like one of the best fisher birds ever.
5.
Yeah,
It's the only diving raptor. Its eyesight adjusts for refraction. It's
they're
the only
incredible.
raptor that does that. They're amazing birds.
I worked in Haines, Alaska. I was on the board of the American Bald Eagle Foundation in Haines, Alaska. So every year we had a bald eagle festival in November. People would come from Japan and Russia and all over the world come up there and watch all the eagles. And of course, they all had cameras the size of a Volkswagen minibus lens on it. And they're taking pictures of these birds. And of course, the bald eagles spend about 90% of their time just perched in a tree because they're not doing. Then they fly down, and the adult would catch a nice salmon and start flying away, and then the young ones would pirate it from it. They'd fly right at the eagle till he'd drop it, and then another one would come and steal that. And it usually ended up with either a raven or a gull getting the salmon because the eagles were too busy fighting amongst themselves. But every year we'd go up there, and it amazed me the power that a bald eagle has over people. They were just so happy to see them, to take a picture, even with just like a cell phone
Yep.
photo or a video. They were just so crazy to have that and so proud that they finally got to see that. And they'd say, the one was, it couldn't have been more than 5 feet from me. It was right up in the tree. And I said, well, you were lucky you weren't pooped on because they're pretty good at that.
Yes,
And
they
he
are.
said, I never thought about that, but look at this video. So it's incredible. It's an
They
incredible bird.
they
And
really are. We were up in Alaska this summer for a few weeks, and so,
oh, nice.
you get to see a bunch of them. And in January, I'm going up, you may be familiar with it, Skagit Valley out in Washington.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's for a chapter in a upcoming book, or a book that I'm writing now, and, so I'm gonna go up and see the bald eagles in Skagit Valley,
Wow.
and
Nice.
very much looking forward to that. It's, they are spectacular birds to see, and
Oh,
to see them in
gosh.
flight is just amazing. And
And that bill is just, you just look at the bill and you say, oh my goodness.
oh, and it's so distinctive. And I'll tell you, did you get to see the Steller sea eagle when it was in Maine those couple of winters?
I did not
Okay,
know. I
so
read all about it.
well, I went out there the 2 winters that it was there, and you go out on a place, the Arrowsick Bridge is where the birders would go and collect to look at the bird, which was fully a mile away. It was upriver a mile. I'll throw a really crappy photo up here. It's an embarrassingly bad photo. But, the Steller sea eagle, this particular one, this shot, I have to explain it because the photo's so bad you can't really tell. But you've got this giant Steller sea eagle on top of a Canada goose that it had just taken out of the sky. So
Mm,
imagine the size of a bird that takes a Canada goose out of the
mm.
sky. And then standing next to it is what looks like a crow. And then you realize it's a full grown bald eagle.
Wow.
And I tried to imagine what these bald eagles were going through. There were 13 of them that were up there at the top of this river where the bend was. And that's where the Stellars hung out for a few days. Before the Stellars got there, they were the apex predator. When they dropped down, the vultures and the crows and everybody else took off, and then they established their, intra-flock pecking order. But now suddenly this massive bird, the large bald eagles weigh about 13 pounds.
Yep.
The Stellars gets up to about 22, 23 pounds. So just imagine that, more than 50% size differential. And it's just, and you see that and you wonder, how does the bald eagle process that? Is it immediate? Did the Stellars have to kill one or two to let everybody know? Or, but, I just, to watch those animals to me is a magical thing.
Even the Canada goose, Scott, what was it thinking? It's thinking nothing much is going to ever bother me up
No.
here. What could possibly hurt me? And then bam, there you
Yep.
go.
Yeah, that had to be a rude awakening for everybody except the Stellars.
Yeah.
The Stellars is probably thinking, "Okay, it doesn't look like I'm gonna get a girlfriend again this winter." But on the other hand, I'm the baddest guy on the river. There's nobody bothering me,
I
and
can't imagine. I've held a lot of bald eagles on my arm. You got the little cane support thing there. Man, that gets heavy after a while.
well,
Just
they
that
do, and I
eagle.
know, like, when I was on the raptor rescue stuff, we would have, falconry gloves, that
Yep.
you wear up
That's
to
what
your
we had.
elbow.
Yep.
And those worked with, everybody that we get, the Coopers and the Sharpies and the Bards and everybody, with two exceptions, the great horned and the bald eagle. They'd slice those. We wore welder's gloves because the falconry gloves, a bald eagle or a great horned owl, learn this the first time. And if you're smart, it's like putting your hand on a hot oven. We don't do that. Okay, I get it. And so yeah, I went out and bought some welder's gloves. I said, I don't have that many tendons and muscles in my forearm. We're not going to go through that again. So
Never shake hands with a great horned owl.
now, see, there's a bumper sticker that would sell at the next birding festival you're speaking at.
Yep.
That would be a great bumper sticker, or a nice title for your next column. So
Yeah.
tell me about, if I'm assessing this correctly. It seems to me that the stuff that you write is a combination of nature, humor, and stream of consciousness.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is that a fair way to assess your
That's
work?
that's a the perfect way.
Okay. And did you come to that by accident, or is that something that funny because stream of consciousness? Did you come to that on purpose? Is that a decision that you made?
I think it was a decision that came over time, bits and pieces at a time, and, you hear from readers and what they like, and they enjoy this. We probably all took those classes, I certainly did in college, where the stream of consciousness, you just wrote things down. Speech, you got up, you couldn't have even a 3 by 5 card, you just had or they'd give you some a name that had, like, 97 letters in it, and they say, "Well, we want you to give a 5-minute talk on what this is." So you just get up there and start babbling on about nothing, and sometimes it worked really well and sometimes not so well. But I always enjoyed that kinda improv speech class, I guess you would call it that. So I certainly do bring something over into the columns and try to do something there too. I love hearing from people and they give me kind of ideas of what to do and you should write about this or you should write about that or what do you think about this? And of course, the wonderful readers always figure you know more than you really do. And I don't try to disavow them of that. So I say, oh, yeah, I could do that. So I love what I do, and I think that's the secret to most everything in life. Love what you do, and I go into career day because they bring in, the lawyer, the fireman, the police chief, all these people with responsible jobs, and they all get up and talk, and the kids are just asking them questions. I can't decide whether I want to be a police officer or a cowboy when I grow up. I think I'm going to be a police officer now because I heard you speak. And then they come up and the teacher will say, now with the other side of this whole story, we brought in Batt, who's a writer. And I get up there and babble on a little bit and get no questions pretty much. They go back to the fireman. How many years of school did you have to go to be a fireman? So I'm standing over there with a lawyer. Us two. Nobody's asking us any questions. So we sneak out early. So but I do try the one thing I try to tell the kids, don't go down a list when you're old enough and say that one pays $127,000 a year. That's what I'm going for. Because how do you know you're even going to like that? You might hate your job and then they can't pay you enough money if you hate your job. Find out what you really like to do and then figure out a way to make a living at it. Will you be able to? Not everybody is, but you got a shot. So do that.
When we were kids, college was kind of a given if you had the opportunity. And I'm no longer sure. And by the way, I mean, I sat on the board of a number of universities and colleges, and I certainly place a tremendous value on education. But I'm not as convinced that that's the best path for everybody to take anymore, like I used to. But when you and I were kids, one of the things that they had then was the first 2 years was general education.
Yeah.
You didn't have to pick a major. In fact, in some colleges, you couldn't. And you
Yeah.
would have to take all of these classes, and then you would say, "Oh my god, sociology, this is unbelievable. I had no idea this existed. This is what I wanna do. I wanna grow up and be like, Mr. Johansson or Mrs. Simpson." And now they want you to pick your major when you're still in high school. It's part of the
They do.
application process. I'm 17 years old. I'm just trying to get a girlfriend and steal a beer. I don't know what I wanna be when I'm 40. I don't know what I wanna be when I'm 18. Why are you making me pick? I think that's such a terrible thing that we've done to young people,
I
is
agree.
give them a chance to get out there to make a couple of mistakes. Yeah, maybe they pick 4 majors in 2 years. So what?
That's right.
Let them explore, and one day, they might wake up and be a humorist and a columnist, or they might wake up and be an accountant and love that, or they might be a cop or a fireman or shortstop for the Yankees.
That's right.
Only if they couldn't become shortstop for the Dodgers, of course.
Oh, gosh,
It's
no.
not. Are you a Twins guy?
The Twins and the St. Louis Cardinals, so, yeah. It
That's a rough year for you then.
was a brutal year.
You didn't have to waste any money on, playoff tickets, though.
No, no, we were lucky enough to see the 7th game back when, the Twins won. It was that wonderful we didn't think we were even gonna have a 7th game and got Kirby Puckett and all his heroics, and it was just I think I still have some hearing loss from sitting in there. It was just an amazing game, and I love baseball. You're so right on that about we had to have some masonry work done. Boy, you try to find a mason. The good ones have they're booked for the next 3 years. So you end up doing a guy that watched somebody do it once and he's free on Sundays. So he comes out. We need a lot of those people.
We
And
do.
it doesn't mean they're smarter than we are in pretty much everything. We need people that can fix things and build things, and because I no longer can do any of that. I can look at things and say, "Here's what I'd like," but I don't know how I could do that.
It's tough. With your love of baseball, you'll appreciate my son and I hosted a Dodger radio show for 2 years.
I'm
We got
sorry.
we got
Yes.
invited by the, Dodgers, and, I gotta tell you, it was I mean, doing the radio show itself was fun. I'm glad we got to do that. But having complete access, going down in the clubhouse and the dugout and sitting up in the press box with Vin
Wow.
Scully and and doing that for 2 years, that was a dream for me. That was just spectacular.
There's a storyteller right there, Vin Scully.
Oh my good
He could make a game. I didn't like the Dodgers, but I loved listening to Vin Scully. I'd say just cut out all the play-by-play stuff. Just tell more of those
Oh,
stories.
he was such a storyteller. I'll share with you a Vin Scully story. So, I owned a marketing company, and one of our clients was a hospital in Southern California. And we used to get a lot of celebrities based on their location. The CEO would call me when that happened. What do we do? Do we need guards? Do we need to close off a hall? How do we handle this? So I get a call from her one night. It's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on a weeknight. We got a big celebrity coming in and da 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 da. And I said, okay, and I never went. I would send somebody down to do that. And I said, well, who is it? And she said, well, it's some guy named Scully, a radio guy. And I said, is it Vin Scully? And she said, yeah. And I said, I'll be there in an hour. So I drove straight to the hospital. I get there, and the woman who was the CEO of the hospital said, what are you doing here? You never come. And I said, I don't care about celebrities. This is Vin Scully. And so she took me into the room, and his wife's name's Sandy, and I got to spend some time with the two of them. And they said, "Are you handling all this for the hospital?" And I said, "I am." And they said, "Are you handling all this for the Dodgers as well?" And I go, "I am," because we did some work for the Dodgers through my company. And I said, "I am." And she said, "Well, would you be willing to, handle the press and everything for Vin and I?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd be willing to do that. I'm a giver. I'm trying to build up some karma points." So I got to give from about midnight that night till 8 the next morning. I think I gave 3 or 4 national press conferences because Vince Scully was
Wow.
big news. And, I'm carrying out the quotes from Vin and his wife and everything. And then when he's getting ready to check out in the morning, he has to write a statement, right? A one-liner that, that he does. And so he's struggling with it. And his wife, the greatest orator I've ever heard, other than Winston Churchill, who obviously I never heard live, but and she looks at him, and he's struggling, trying to come up with something. She goes, Vince Scully, use your words. And I'm trying to imagine anybody ever. So he looked at me, he goes, would you mind writing this for me? And I said, you want me to write words that are going to come out of your mouth? Yeah, I'm thrilled. So I did. And it got picked up by stations all over the country.
Wow.
And national media, when we'd had a client that would be on national media, you'd call and say, get us 10 samples, 3 small markets, 3 big markets. And so I called the media company that did that, and I said, I'm going to need you to pull these Vin Scully clips when they run. And she goes, okay, the standard 10. And I said, no, every single station that it runs on, every single station that's going to have my statement with Vin Scully's name on it on their B roll, I wanted, and I did. And for me,
Wow.
magical moment.
How much did you have to pay him to be allowed to do that?
You know what? She kept insisting on paying me. I said, Sandy,
My
you can
gosh.
write as large a check as you want. It'll never be cash. And then I got to know him. That was before we did the radio show. Then I got to know him through the radio show. And, that was, and to hear him, to sit with him and have dinner and have him tell stories,
Man,
I didn't need the game, to your point. The
I would have
baseball game
loved
is
that.
getting in the way of Mr. Scully speaking.
I would
Anyway,
I
I
would
guess
have loved
we
that.
all have our childhood heroes, and he and John Wooden were mine.
Yeah,
They were my 2 giant sports heroes. Neither of them were playing. Well, Wooden was actually. He's
Wooden
in the
blade, yeah.
College Hall of Fame, and I got to spend some time with Mr. Wooden as well, so
Wow.
I felt very blessed. All right, I'm gonna throw my email up here. Anybody has any questions for me, send them, and I'll answer. If you've got questions for Mr. Batt, send them, and I'll forward them to him. And the last thing I'm gonna bother you with, Al, is if you could recommend a book other than your own that you think a nature-based audience would enjoy reading, I would love for you to share it.
Sure. Birding from a Tractor Seat by Charles Flugum. And Flugum is Flugum. It's a wonderful book written by a fellow dairy. We were dairy farmers. He was a dairy farmer when I grew up. He was the guy that knew all about birds as a kid. You just want to follow him around. The problem is it's been out of print for quite a while, so sometimes you can still find it on Amazon or eBay or things. But it's written by a guy sitting in a tractor seat and talking about the birds he sees. And he was just, I love Charlie. I love talking to him, although I couldn't hear a word he said because he whispered everything. Then he had one bad ear, so you had to get around to the good ear to talk to him. But again, I've known the best people on earth, and Charlie was certainly right up there. And I highly recommend that book. It'll give you a different perspective, I think, because this is all written long before we're getting all the digital reports on what we're seeing, what everybody's seeing in the state over. We know where every bird is. Charlie didn't have any of that. He had to go find them himself, and it's an amazing story.
Well, hopefully, I have found a copy of it, and there's a picture of the cover up on screen as we talk.
Wonderful.
But that's it. But Al, I sure appreciate the time. I hope this isn't the only time we do this because I had a blast.
Scott, thanks for enhancing my existence. Appreciate you and all that you do.
Right back at you, and I think you're gonna bring some enjoyment to some of our audience. If you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe. You notice we don't run ads or anything. This is not a money-making deal. It's just a way of bringing in some great guests and trying to share the story with as many people as possible. So if you can comment or like or whatever, it just helps us do that. Al, you may not know, but after every podcast, I do about a 10-minute thing called field notes where I pick one bird or park or animal or something, and I just kind of go off, write my little column on that and have some fun with it. So that'll be following. And as I do every time when we're getting ready to close this up, after I say thank you very much, Mr. Batt, is when you're out there in nature and you're looking for all the things we've been talking about for the last hour, remember to stay safe and stay curious. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching today. Have a great one.